God Ascended, an Archives of Evelium Tale, Book 3. Written by Jeffrey Spate. Narrated by Adam Blanford. Prologue. The gods granted the invaders safe quarter in Mount Anvil, with the understanding that they would meet an approach of Evelium with an ire unmatched. The Gatekeeper's Abridged History of Tiveriel, Volume 1, Chapter 5. Unearthed from the ruins of Meriden, the month of Anar, 1217 A.T. Rock showered down upon Messereth and jarred him from his sleep. He yawned, crawled to his feet, and shook the debris from his back. How he abhorred having his slumber interrupted in such a manner, especially when he lazed beside a favored fetid pool deep within Mount Anvil. Alas, the damage was done. His stomach growled, and he turned to his lair's exit. No doubt Zalenreith would awaken too. It would serve him well to find nourishment before long. The ancient black dragon crawled from the vacuous cavern and welcomed the warm evening sun on his face. He stretched his front legs, arched his back like a cat after a long nap beside the hearth, and shook his wings to chase away the chill of his lair. A chill that always seemed to stay with him too long. Messereth looked himself over. Every black scale gleamed like polished obsidian. Each talon was honed to a knife's edge. He smoothed his tail through his foreclaws, snagging on the lethal barb at its tip. He truly was the incarnation of beauty, the embodiment of perfection. The second quake jolted him to his senses. Deep within his core, there was a void where fear once lived, a comfort where unrest once ruled. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for, the very reason he came to Tiveriel. Since he and Zalenreith arrived from the Fae, he felt the Creator God's presence. They had long ago left his realm, and, until this very afternoon, squabbled over the favor of the feeble species that somehow dominated Tiveriel, the exalted races, as they were called. It was laughable. They were little more than rats. Now that the quake subsided and his mind tore away the cobwebs of sleep, he no longer sensed Vela and her brothers. He did not know where they went or why, only that they were gone. And that changed everything. Without their gods to protect them, the mystics would now flee like rabbits in the hawk's shadow as soon as they could secure safe passage from this mortal realm. The time to exact his revenge was fleeting, and revenge he desired more than claiming Tiveriel for himself. It bore a hole in his gut like a worm through the soil. It gnawed at him that these lesser beings lived with impunity, while he, Messereth, Liege of Chaos, wallowed in squalor. Heavy footfalls snapped him from his bellicose thoughts as Zalenreith joined him outside the entrance of the former Zaristar stronghold they claimed as their own. Her blue eyes drew him in, as though they were windows to a better life. Her ivory scales were nearly as magnificent as his own. She whipped her tail around her and sat.
"Have you felt it?" Messereth asked. "Have you felt their departure?"
"Of course. The quakes roused me from a deep and dreamful sleep."
It pained Messereth to think of his precious bride being disturbed in such a manner. The gods once more showed their selfish predilections.
"I'm sorry, my dear, but I promise you many nights of comfort to come."
Zalenreith ran her tongue across her teeth.
"Are we to taste the flesh of mystics?"
"Yes, my terror. We shall travel to each of their keeps to devour them if we must. I plan to take my time with the one called Marina."
"Lover of the metallics,"
Zalenreith spat.
"Come, we begin with Ember's watch."
Messereth dove from the rock face and soared over the Bay of Tailings. He craned his neck to see Zalenreith gliding in his wake. They flew over Lurtmore, and the sandy shores of mainland Evelium appeared on the horizon. Messereth's mouth watered. He never would have considered such a brazen approach when Vela and her brothers walked these lands, even when their petty war distracted them. But now, little stood between him and his destiny. He could taste it. The sun hung low in the west, and the shoreline gave way to verdant forest, but they would not rest yet, not until the mystics were no more. With every beat of his wings, Ember's watch drew nearer, and Messereth's rage swelled. What began as an ulcer in the pit of his stomach grew and grew, until his entire body was aflame with the desire to kill. A dark tower pierced the horizon, and Messereth's lips quivered with anticipation. He dove toward the walled compound and landed in the courtyard. Other than the whoosh of Zalenreith's wings as she landed beside him, all was quiet. There was no warm glow emanating from within the keep, as the weak eyes of man required. Messereth stooped over and peered through a window. Empty. His lips curled into a snarl.
There's nothing here.
Zalenreith released a blast of ice across the courtyard. Messereth spun to face her and saw a bulky form encased in ice between them.
What is it?
He asked.
A construct, Zalenreith said. Left as a ward, no doubt.
Pay it no mind. We move to the next keep. They must be hiding somewhere.
Zalenreith leaped into the air. Messereth followed. Throughout the night and into the next morning, they visited each of the mystics' compounds, and each one they found vacant. With each disappointment, Messereth grew more incensed. With his blood boiling, he led his bride in razing the watches to the ground. They left nothing but rubble in their path. As the tower of Pyra's watch crumbled to dust behind them, Messereth stepped from the debris.
They have fled.
Zalenreith growled.
They make for their waystones. They plan to ascend to Kalmandon.
Then we will not have the fortune to catch them all. But there may be time for one if we hurry to the Stoneheart Pass.
The dragons took flight on weary wings. Fueled by his anger, Messereth pushed through exhaustion. If he was not destined to destroy all the mystics, he would at least devour the flesh of one. The Elothral Mountains pierced the dawn like serrated teeth. Below, amidst the dewy grass, sat a flat stone that cast a cerulean glow. A shadowed form stood at its center, the light of the stone growing with every passing second. Messereth dove from the sky, the figure his sole focus. He crashed into his target, the aura of the waystone temporarily blinding him. He heard his enemy tumble through the grass. The grunts and groans that followed every thud was acknowledgement that he had interrupted Torrent's ascension. His vision cleared, and Zalenreith landed in the grass with her wings splayed like a kestrel upon a starling. A burst of energy threw her backward just enough for the mystic to crawl out from beneath her. Torrent climbed to his feet, and the earth shook. Blood trickled from his white beard. He removed a rod of solid rhodium from his belt and held it out before him. It flowed like liquid metal into a javelin with a point at each end. Rocks cascaded from the cliff face that marked the entrance to the Stoneheart Pass. The ground once more trembled between them. Torrent jabbed his javelin at Zalenreith.
You're too late, worms.
I stand between you and your precious waystone, Messereth said. It would seem we are just in time.
The earth shook again, stronger than before. The ground beside Zalenreith caved in, and an enormous myriapede burst to the surface. Zalenreith reeled to defend herself against the unexpected attack.
Balin might say otherwise,
Torrent said. The myriapede's pincers clamped down around Zalenreith's neck. Its countless spiked legs probed her scales, searching for a gap through which to impale her. Zalenreith's tail lashed wildly. Her talons scraped against Balin's carapace. Messereth eyed Torrent, who wore a smug smile across his bloodied chin, and then his struggling bride. He unleashed a flood of acid in an attempt to stall the mystic from reaching his waystone, and then lunged for the myriapede. He bit into the back of Balin's head, the brittle carapace crunching as he bore down. Balin stabbed Messereth's belly with a stinger at the base of his tail. A pulse of pain flooded Messereth's body. Torrent leaped over Messereth's acid pool and landed upon the waystone. Messereth released Balin's neck and bound after the mystic. Balin spun from Zalenreath and swiped Messereth's legs out from under him. The great dragon toppled forward, his chin hitting the earth and jarring his teeth together. The smell of damp soil flooded his nostrils. He regained his footing and made for the waystone. In a burst of light, Torrent vanished. The waystone's aura diminished to a dull, erratic flicker. It was over. He had failed to destroy even one mystic. He had broken his promise to deliver Zalenreath the taste of their flesh. Balin dove beneath the surface, a gaping hole left in the ground between Messereth and Zalenreath. Enraged, Messereth said nothing. If he could not have the satisfaction of smiting his enemy, he would gladly take it out on what his enemy treasured most. He pushed the pain and fatigue deep within him and took to the air once more. Despite Zalenreath struggling to keep pace, Messereth would not rest until he quelled his rage. Soon, Lindemir was beneath them. It was not much of a city. The War of Rescission saw to that, but it would sate his fury, for now. Their true advance would not begin until he allied himself with the Aged One, and blights poured forth from the wistful timberlands in untold numbers. Beyond the last of the trees, torchlight flickered against a darkening sky. The dragons circled overhead. Lights danced in the streets. Messereth plunged toward the center of the town. A rash course of action, but all he could think about was the taste of flesh. People screamed and ran as he swooped low and breathed acid across the city's main square. Acrid smoke billowed into the air as flesh dissolved in the acid's path. Zalenreath careened into a building and sent a shower of rock through the frantic crowd. A torch bounced off Zalenreath's chest. She plucked a young Evenese guard in glinting armor from the ground and swallowed him whole. Messereth thundered forward, paying no care of the surrounding structures. Trees snapped like twigs, and buildings crumbled as he charged. He snatched a young Evenese woman from the cobblestone street and gnashed her between his teeth. Ah, the intoxicating taste of pure blood meat. A horn bellowed. Their surprise was laid bare. An arrow ricocheted off Messereth's scales and sailed into the night. Armor clanked as soldiers rushed into the square. A hail of arrows crashed into Zalenreath. She replied with a deluge of ice that encased a throng of bowmen in a frigid tomb. Messereth tore a hole in the corner of a stone building and plucked a man with stark white hair from within. He tossed the screaming man down his gullet.
At night, these vermin prefer to hide within their lairs.
Zalenreath lashed a building with her tail. The facade shattered, and people ran into the streets. She grabbed mouthfuls of them and gulped them down. More soldiers poured into the square. Unlike the first to arrive, who carried little more than short swords and bows, these soldiers carried sturdy tridents and were accompanied by horse-drawn ballistae. The dragons came together at the center of the square. A ballista bolt whirred inches away from Messereth's face and tore a hole through his wing. A trident lodged in Zalenreath's chest, sending her to flight. Messereth surveyed the field before him. More soldiers filed into the square from his left. Patience. He must have patience. Tonight was merely the first salvo in his war to rule Tiveriel. In time, it would be his. He unleashed his acid breath across the square. Soldiers scattered for cover like mice from a toppled barrel. Before they could recover, he beat his powerful wings and lifted into the air. He aimed for the wistful timberlands as the crowd cheered below him. A smile crept across his face. Evelium did not know what awaited it. Chapter 1. We have seen the sands of Kalmandan. The mortal mind cannot contemplate their beauty. The Tome of Mystics. Unknown origin. Unearthed from the ruins of Oda Nord, month of Bracken, 1320 AT. Umra the Peacebreaker shielded his eyes from the blinding light that bombarded him from all sides. As the light faded, an idyllic landscape of endless beaches and gently lapping azure waters revealed itself.
Kalmandan.
He stepped from the edge of the waystone that brought him here, and innumerable glass beads shifted underfoot. The warmth they imparted crept up his legs and flooded his entire form. Countless whispers greeted him.
Peacebreaker.
He kneeled and gathered a handful of the beads in his hand. They clinked gently as they rolled over each other in his palm. Each of them contained at its core a vortex of amber energy that swirled contentedly. It was remarkable to think that everything one was in life could be contained in such an unassuming vessel in death. It seemed so trivial, so insignificant. Like sand through an hourglass, he let the souls cascade back to their resting place and gritted his teeth. The tusks in his lower jaw jabbing at his upper lip, he stood and focused on what he came here for. There was no sign of Spara, who ascended only a couple of days prior. She knew little more about Kalmandan's secrets than Umra did, since she hadn't ascended with the other mystics at the end of the Age of Grace. She could not have gotten far. Umra scrambled to the crest of a nearby dune and surveyed the landscape. Rolling sands gave way to lush gardens. Beyond, a crystalline tower breached the horizon, beckoning to him from open grasslands. Umra drew a deep breath of sweet air to settle his racing mind. He thought of the path that brought him here, to Kalmandan. A lowly half-orc orphan becomes a paladin, of which there were supposed to be none. In banishing Nor to the hells of Pragaris, the gods deemed the paladin worthy to become a mystic. Now, he walked the land of the creator gods. How unlikely! He set off toward the tower on foot, hoping to maintain some element of modesty on such hallowed grounds. Who was he to soar brazenly through the heavens on angelic wings? Soon, lush foliage overcame the beaches, and the shifting sands narrowed to a path that led into a garden. Umra marveled at the mysterious creatures that floated from flower to flower, like so many ethereal butterflies. Trails of chartreuse mist streamed from the tips of their pointed wings as they hovered over each bloom they probed with an oblong proboscis. He continued through the garden, its tranquility nearly erasing purpose from his mind. Umra came to a circular gate of gleaming metal embedded within a stone arch. The arch was covered in purple flowers that matched the delicate metalwork of the gate, which was carelessly left open. Possibly this was the first sign he was on the right track. He passed beneath the arch, and serenity abruptly yielded to despair. A short distance along the path of souls that led him through the gardens, the vibrant foliage withered to brittle black husks. Umra kneeled at the edge of the corruption and rubbed a narrow leaf between his fingers. It crumbled to dust. Beneath it lay the tip of a sickly crimson tendril. Umra followed the tendril's trail, the warmth from the beads underfoot intensifying to a searing heat. The gentle whispers that welcomed Umra since his arrival twisted into screams of torment. Along the path before him, specters roamed, their ghostly forms having emerged from shattered beads within the corruption's reach. The lurid purple apparitions bore smoky black eyes and mouths of pointed teeth. Long strands of ebony hair undulated from their scalps, like fronds of kelp swaying in the sea. While some specters staggered about the path aimlessly, others tore at the earth with purpose. With each rake of their elongated claws, more beads fractured. The broken beads sparked. Purple wisps of smoke coalesced into newly formed specters. Each of the newborns was greeted with a chorus of raspy squawks from their brethren, who huddled over the burgeoning spirits. Umra took another step along the path, and the first of the specters turned its attention toward him. It moaned hauntingly, and others of its kind heeded its call. The corrupted spirits gathered and approached Umra, hissing as they neared. Umra's stomach sank at the depths of Spara's depravity. Was there no length she was willing to go to in her quest for revenge? Was there nothing sacrosanct? He summoned Forcite to his hand, the blade humming as it took form amongst wisps of blue ether. His armor materialized as a series of overlapping, diamond-shaped rhodium shards that locked into place, one after the other, encasing him in gleaming plates of the rare metal. The first of the specters upon him, He slashed Forsyte through its form and sent the soul dissipating in a cloud of inky vapor. A second specter's claws screeched against Umra's armor, sparks dancing across his chest. He beat the apparition away with the back of his fist. As the specter staggered backward, Umra noticed the mark of his fist across its neck. It glowed like a vibrant amber brand against the heliotrope of its incorporeal form. The specter shuddered. For a moment, it clawed furiously at the brand, and then its arms went slack, its angry hisses quelled. The amber spread across its form, and, slowly, it took the visage of an elderly Zarastar man. The spirit smiled, looked over itself with obvious satisfaction, and bowed to Umra. With a sigh, the spirit returned to its bead, which absorbed it and fused shut in a flash of light.
"There is another way,"
Umra said, astonished by what he just witnessed.
"I can save them."
Forsyte's voice resonated in Umra's mind. Yes, it seems the Ascended's touch can restore their true nature. Possibly, if you heal this corrupted land, they shall reward you with their peace. Umra thrust Forsyte into the ground beside him and clasped the pyramid icon he wore around his neck. The blue glow emanating from the wind currents etched into the icon's facets intensified. Umra held an open palm toward the rest of the attacking specters. A vibrant celestial light radiated from his form. "Stop," he said, his tone resolute. The specters halted their advance inches from Umra. The mist wafting from their forms intertwined with Umra's and drifted into the sky. Umra's gaze met the matte black eyes of the incorporeal beings before him. He held their attention.
"Brothers and sisters, I mean you no harm. A poison is spreading through the gardens of Kalmandan that befouls each of you. Give me but a moment, and I hope you shall find your way back to your respite."
The specters held their place. They affixed their blank glares on Umra as if locked in a trance. Umra kneeled, keeping one hand facing the specters and pushing his other into the scorched and cracked beads beneath him. The anguish of the afflicted surged through him. He withdrew his hand and shook his head, gripped the handle of his sword.
"No, I can do this. They deserve better."
He thrust his hand back into the corruption and fought the cacophony that tore at his mind. Umra focused his energy on the tormented souls.
"Find calm in my presence," he said.
There was no discernible response, only the continued discord of the spirits. Umra bore down, gritting his teeth.
"With your help, I shall return you to the tranquil rest the gods have promised you."
The screams abated, and the specters edged away. The corruption's tendrils spread up Umra's arm, and unrelenting pain grew in concert. He fought the pain and imposed his will on the landscape. He envisioned the corruption fading, the gardens of Kalmandan once again serene, unspoiled. Umra's aura flowed through the tendrils, and their color slowly shifted from red to vibrant blue. Umra persisted until his essence pervaded the entirety of the corrupted space. The tendrils quivered, struggling against Umra's celestial power. Overwhelmed, they recoiled upon themselves and withered. The specters surrounding Umra bowed their heads and drifted back to the scorched patches where their respective beads lay cracked and still smoldered with fiery embers. As they approached their eternal resting places, the specters grew calm, the color fading from their forms like that of a week-old bruise until they were a pale shade of ochre. They took on their true forms. There were Evanese, Eminti, Forestair, and humans among them. To Umra's surprise, there were even a few Ryzeran and orcs. It would seem that all were welcomed by the gods, all equally worthy of the gods' love. Among the sands of Kalmandan, there was no difference between the races of men, between pureblood and mongrel. Each soul was weighed by the way it held itself in life, not by the color of its skin or the shape of its ears.
"Peacebreaker,"
the souls said in unison, their individual voices little more than a whisper.
"I bid you return to your eternal serenity,"
Umra said. Their whispers of his name continuing, the spirits returned to their beads, the fractures that released them sealing with a flash of light. As their presence faded, So did Umra's aura, the corruption gone. Quiet prevailed for a moment. Umra stood and looked for any remnants of the corruption that might enable its return. His head ached with the echoes of the tortured. He rubbed his temple and pulled Forsete free of the ground. A more equitable outcome.
Thank you, as always, for your sound counsel.
If you are to walk among the gods, your grace must touch every soul with equal love. You must see all creatures' intrinsic worth as comparable to your own. There can be no favorites, none overlooked. Otherwise, you are no better than the least of them. We are now all your children, Ascended One. Umra nodded. It was, frankly, all a little too much. He never strived for exaltation. In fact, he spent much of his life actively avoiding attention, willing to trade his unique skill set for the money he needed to eke out a meager lifestyle and keep his secret hidden. Ascended One. How ridiculous. He failed to protect the Bloodbound, failed to recognize Spara's deception, failed to defeat the Grey Queen. What made him worthy of such reverence? Nothing came to mind. The totality of his power was but a fragment of Vela's, which she saw fit to share. Without her, he was nothing.
Shall we see which of my children heeds my call?
Umra asked, willing Forsete and his armor to dissipate. He removed the pyramid icon from around his neck and ran his fingers over its sharp edges and the patterns etched in its sides. He sat, crossed his legs, and set the icon gently on the ground before him. Drawing in a deep breath, he filled his senses with this strange world around him. The sweet, unfamiliar scent of the air calmed his mind. The warmth emanating from the beads upon which he sat soothed his body. He closed his eyes and focused on the rhythm of his breathing. After a moment, he placed his hands on the beads and spread his fingers out among them. Countless voices pervaded his mind, an unintelligible clamor.
Be still. Who among you will tell me what happened here so I may better serve you?
Umra opened his eyes. He plucked a single bead that now shone brighter than the rest from among Kalmandan's masses and held it between his thumb and index finger. He smiled.
Come, talk with me.
The mote of amber energy swirling at the bead's core intensified until beams of light broke through its surface. The light coalesced into the visage of a fox. Freed from its resting place, the brilliant golden spirit stretched its legs and bounded through the gardens. Umra climbed to his feet and followed the fox as it scurried. Coming to the edge of a deep crater in the earth, the fox pounced on a shard of pink stone and looked at Umra. Beyond the crater's far edge, a path of scorched earth led to the glimmering tower in the distance. A beam of light now escaped from a fracture in the building's facade and cast an amber scar across the pale pink sky. Umra squatted, the spirit coming to his side and pressing its head into his hand. Umra scratched the fox's head and peered down at the fractured stone. It was Spara's Eye of Eminus, which they had retrieved from Aldersor's vault. It lay broken in the garden, the origin of the scorched earth that stretched to the tower on the distant horizon. Umra shook his head. Spara told him it was a sending stone so she could locate her mother's soul upon ascending to Kalmandan. What a web of lies she spun! And every one of them ensnared him like an unsuspecting fly on a black widow's tangled strands.
Are you able to tell me what happened here?
The fox glanced up at Umra.
The Ascended One with anger in her eyes came to this place. She planted her egg in Kalmandan's gardens, and a monstrosity emerged, corrupting the land and leaving a trail of fire in its wake. She called it Godslayer.
Umra snarled. Not only had Spara fooled him with her ruse, but he helped her acquire the very thing she needed to bring the Pantheon to its knees. He picked up a shard of the egg and turned it over in his hand as he looked at the tower.
And that?
She said to become a god, one must kill a god. She directed her Godslayer there to Vela's grace. A rash choice to my simple mind.
Rash indeed. Umra couldn't fathom what kind of abomination Spara could have at her side that would enable her to kill a god. But surely Vela was a poor place to begin such a quest. Considering the depths of Spara's fury, it was not surprising that logic may elude her.
Thank you, my friend. You may return to your slumber if you choose.
I will. But maybe just a few moments in this place, if you should permit it.
The least I can do, Umra said. Be well.
Umra took off running along the discolored path Spara and her godslayer had forged. With every footfall, life blossomed, overcoming the corruption and restoring Kalmandon to its natural state of beauty. Chapter 2.
I do not concern myself with the folly of witches. Let them curse what they will. The Forine bloodline is unassailable.
The collected letters of Modig Forine. Letter to Her Holiness Tahira Reese, dated 11th of Prien, 1 AF. Unearthed from the ruins of Vanyarain, month of Aachen, 1301 AT. Anaris lay in ruin. Even the Cormaic temple had been destroyed by the Blights and their titans. Turin Forine crouched at the base of a sundered statue amidst the overgrown cloisters whose bluestone walls remained reasonably intact. A bead of sweat ran down her face as she hid from the afternoon sun. She took a bite of a pale green pear she had picked from a nearby tree, admiring the contrast of its lush flesh with the gray of her own. She read the patinated copper plaque on the statue's base. Balrus Silentread, a man of unrivaled selflessness and honor.
Where'd your selflessness get you?
She asked the white marble face that stared back at her, half buried in the earth.
He was a great man,
a voice said from behind her.
One of the best.
She glanced over her shoulder to see a hooded Rizaran man with long white hair and piercing lavender eyes. His graphite skin was only slightly darker than hers. He bore a jagged scar on his neck. Turin was there the day he had earned it. A blight burst out of the woods, and Shadow was the first to leap to the group's defense. Before she knew it, both he and the blight were on the ground, one with a dagger sticking from its chest, the other hemorrhaging from his neck. They would have lost him if it weren't for Nicholas interceding. He smiled.
You knew him?
Turin asked.
Yes.
Shadow crouched beside his young queen.
He fell in Meriden when we fought the devils of Pragaris. He was like a father to us. Sorry, I had no idea. No need for apologies. There has been little occasion to tell you about him. Besides, that was a long time ago, and we have more important things to worry about now. Where are Senna and Aradon? Scouting. The place is crawling with blights. I told them to meet us here at dusk so we can enter the city at nightfall and be back to Peacebreaker Keep before the sun rises. Hopefully they'll have some semblance of an account of how many civilians are still in the city. Sounds like as good a plan as any.
Shadow rubbed the back of his neck.
Laudin and Nivara are keeping watch outside the north gate. I'll gather them and we'll meet back up here within the hour.
Turin nodded. She grew up with the Barrows Pact. They'd taught her everything they knew, and she had learned to trust them implicitly. But they were not her friends. They were the Barrows Pact, heroes of great renown. They had fought alongside the Peacebreaker and had led the resistance against the Grey Queen and the Blights ever since. Evelium owed them more than could ever be repaid, and yet she found their presence stifling. In their company, she felt like a child with overbearing parents. With Senna and Aradon, she could be herself. For that reason alone, she insisted on including them whenever she led these search and rescue missions. They'd grown up together in Ruari, trained together since they could walk, and grew to be the best of friends. She found their company a calming influence on her disquieted mind, despite Senna's antics. She climbed to her feet and pushed a few errant strands of raven blue hair from her eyes.
Here at dusk, then.
As silently as he'd arrived, Shadow darted across the overgrown courtyard, leaped over the temple's crumbling wall, and fell from sight. Turin shifted her attention back to the center of the city, knowing that her friends would be returning soon. She took another bite of her pear, a rivulet of its sweet juice dribbling down her chin. A bush rustled behind her.
Is there something else, Shadow? We need to get on with things.
Instead of Shadow's disarming timbre, the reply came in a series of clicks and chitters. Turin looked over her shoulder to see a blight sentry. The creature stood twice her height, its arboreal form reminiscent of ancient cedar. Long scales of red bark peeled from its trunk-like body, and its cylindrical head boasted drooping boughs covered with pine needles and cones. The blight's eyes glowed amber like autumn leaves, the matching orb within its chest swirling with discontent. With a grunt, it swung a great club. Turin ducked, and the club whirred over her head, taking a chunk of white marble from the remnants of Balrus's robes. Turin rolled. She came to her knees in the high grass and pushed a hand into the loamy soil. She needed no god to wield her magic, no icon to store their gifts. As the cool earth cascaded over her fingers, she felt Tyveriel's life force from which she drew her power, and a chill ran up her arm. The massive blight sentry lumbered forward, sending a shudder through the ground, as though Tyveriel, too, ran cold. Its eyes flared, and it hoisted its club overhead. Turin thrust her free hand into the air, and a stone spike pierced the surface soil, sending a shower of dirt and debris into the air. The spike impaled the blight, lifting it from its feet, the creature's root-like digits reaching out for the earth that proved out of reach. The blight unleashed a horrid squeal. Its body shook, and it dropped its club on the ground at Turin's knees. The light in its eyes and core faded. The blight fell limp. Turin climbed to her feet and inspected her foe with a cocked head. Rarely did she have the opportunity to get so close to one when it wasn't trying to take her life. It was beautiful, as much a part of Tyveriel as she. It had every right to live on this land, but there was no means by which to negotiate with its kind. They simply poured forth from the wistful timberlands in endless waves and laid waste to the constructs of mankind. No, the blights would not be satisfied until they completely eradicated the last trace of humanity from Evelium. As unfortunate as it was, the remnants of mankind had no choice but to fight. They had been given no quarter since that fateful night when the Grey Queen led the blights in their unprovoked attack on Vanyarain. Of course, she was only an infant at the time, and all she knew of the events that fractured the hallowed kingdom she had been meant to rule, she'd learned from the stories of those lucky enough to survive. A twig snapped across the cloisters. With ice in her veins, Turin spun to meet another foe. Instead, a dog appeared from behind the cloister wall. She was lean, with a solid brown head and a speckled body, with another patch of brown at the base of her cropped tail. A long pink tongue lolled from her open mouth. When she saw Turin, she ran for her and leaped up into her face and licked, nearly knocking Turin over.
All right, down, Neela. Good to see you too.
The dog jumped again, but met Turin's hand, which guided her back to the ground. Turin kneeled and scratched Neela behind her ear.
I knew you were going to do that. No jumping.
Neela licked Turin's face again.
Everything okay?
A voice asked from behind Neela. Turin looked up into the friendly face of her best friend, Senarin Riora. Senna's smile betrayed her mischievous personality, and her eyes, well, her eyes were like pools of green water that set the boys and girls of Ruwari to fits of stupidity. Her aminty skin was as fair as she was tough, and the tangle of wavy blonde hair cropped just above her shoulder made her look like she had always just rolled out of bed. Senna wore auburn leathers and a low-slung belt that carried a machete at each hip. Turin looked down at herself and sighed. She would never match up, queen or not. Behind Senna lumbered a broad-shouldered human man, with dark features but for his pale blue eyes. Eridon Ketch had a youthful face, despite being a year older than Turin and Senna, which now dripped with sweat at the exertion of keeping pace with his partner. He carried a steel halberd, which bore an increasing amount of his weight with each stride. Turin smiled.
Just the usual overzealous greeting. I meant our friend behind you.
Senna nodded at the impaled blight behind Turin.
This?
Turin waved dismissively at the blight.
I had it under control. I can see that,
Senna said.
All the same, we probably shouldn't be leaving anyone alone out here anymore.
Weeds everywhere,
Eridon agreed.
That bad? We were able to get a look at most of the city,
Senna said.
There were several patrols, some signs of skirmishes as well. The reports of people about the few remaining buildings seemed to be accurate. We noticed 2 doors with fresh blue triangles painted on them, both in the inner district. The outer rings seemed completely overrun. This bumbling oaf nearly got us noticed several times. We shouldn't go tonight.
Eridon frowned, gave Senna a playful shove.
I'm not good at being quiet, but I help in other ways.
You certainly do.
Turin put a hand on Eridon's broad shoulder and gave it a squeeze.
Tonight, we focus on the painted homes. They openly signal a desire for extraction. I only hope there aren't too many of them. Indrisor likes to limit the number of civilians in the portal at any given time.
Eridon nodded. Senna grimaced.
Are the others ready? Yes. Shadow, Nivara, and Lauden monitor the road north. They will be here shortly. Nicholas and Indrisor wait for us at the keep.
Good. Eridon slumped down on the plinth of Balrus's statue and laid back against its legs, his arms folded behind his head.
Time for a little nap before a long night.
He closed his eyes, Neela curling up at his feet. Senna shrugged, her green eyes flashing in the setting sun.
I guess we're on watch. We're better off with him well rested,
Turin said.
He gets so cranky when he's tired.
Eridon opened an eye and batted the 2 of them away with an exaggerated swat of his hand. Turin and Senna found a shady spot along the cloister wall where a fountain once babbled. They sat against the wall shoulder to shoulder, so they had a view of the entire garden.
This place must have been beautiful in its day,
Senna said.
Do you ever wonder what it was like to live in a city like this? Sure. Nicholas told me a story about his brother once. He was apparently a brewer of some renown. People throughout Evelium knew and drank Barnswallow ales. There were places called taverns, where people would gather and make merry over pints of his brews. They played music and games and got into fights.
Senna's eyes went wide.
That sounds like too much fun. Maybe someday we'll be able to go to a tavern and get in a fight. Maybe someday.
A hole as wide as the spire rift filled Turin's chest. These people, her people, deserved better than she could give them. They deserved to enjoy their lives, stumbling out of taverns and returning to warm, comfortable homes with their loved ones. And yet, the Grey Queen, her abomination of a father, and the endless waves of blights had kept them in this stalemate for the better part of 2 decades. Most of what remained of humanity lived in caves like animals, while the less fortunate struggled to survive among the ruins of Evelium's once idyllic cities and towns. These rescue missions were not enough. Turin knew, at some point, she would have to do something drastic if she were to turn the tide, if she were to find herself worthy of being their queen. She just didn't know what that something was. Senna rubbed Turin's shoulder.
Are you okay?
Turin's thoughts snapped back to the present.
Yeah, sure. I just want to get this over with.
Senna nodded and bit her bottom lip.
There can't be many of them left. Hopefully this will be our last sweep of Inaris. The rest of the old cities are already empty.
An airy whistle sounded from beyond the crumbling wall of the temple grounds, alerting Turin and Senna of Shadow's approach. Neela's short tail wagged frenetically, but she maintained her position at Eridon's crossed feet. Shadow rounded the corner, his black cloak flapping in the breeze. Lauden and Nivara followed. Lauden's stride was effortless, as though he barely made contact with the earth. The Aminti Ranger had dark hair, which he wore short, and ice-blue eyes. Despite being into his 2nd century, he maintained a youthful appearance, with nothing more than a few age lines at the corners of his eyes. He slung his bow over his shoulder and eyed the impaled blight beside the remnants of Balrus's statue as he stretched his back. Nivara's green eyes glistened in the light of the setting sun as she came to his side and blew an errant lock of flame-red hair from her freckled face.
It's quiet along the road north. We shouldn't have much trouble getting everyone to Peacebreaker Keep if we can get them out of the city. Therein lies the rub.
Senna nodded over her shoulder.
The place is crawling with weeds. It seems like there's more each time we attempt one of these insane rescue missions.
Nivara extended a hand to Senna and helped her up.
Their numbers do continue to grow. It won't be long before even the caves aren't safe for our people.
Don't remind me, Turin said, waving off Nivara's offer of help and climbing to her feet.
We need to catch a break.
She gestured wildly with her hands.
All this is pointless if we don't turn the tide.
It's never pointless to save lives,
Eridon said, twisting his back until it popped like a chain of minor explosions. Senna cringed.
Gross.
You try carrying this thing all day,
Eridon said, lifting his halberd from its resting place against the plinth of Balrus's sundered statue.
Your back would hurt too.
Shadow guarded his eyes against the setting sun, his graphite skin glistening in what remained of its presence.
Where are the homes we are targeting? There are 2 of them, Senna said, both in the inner circle. Of course. We should get going then. Whatever advantage darkness gives us will arrive shortly.
With a bloodied sky in the west fading to deep purple overhead, the party slipped past crumbling stone buildings the color of storm clouds. Lush shrubs and tall clumps of switchgrass overgrew what remained of the cobblestone streets. A deer grazed beyond the first bridge. As the party approached, the deer froze. Its ears twitched, and it bounded off toward the center of the city. Heavy footfalls clapped against stone. Shadow waved the party off the street to the corner of what was once a tavern or inn. Neela growled. Turin pressed her back up against the wall. She ran her palms across the stone and welcomed the cold, rough surface as it abraded her skin. She imagined the streets of Anaris teeming with life. Children chased each other in a game of tag. Shop owners hurried about to close their stores for the night. Lovers ducked into the shadowed alleyways, the way life should be, the way her mother and Talus described what it was like before the raising of Vanyarain and the rise of the Grey Queen. Turin peered around the corner of the building through a clump of tangled vines. A warm, golden glow lit the chest of a sturdy blight that lumbered into the intersection. Its bark-like skin was white and marked with dark scars like an aspen. It stood no less than 20 feet tall, and sawtooth leaves topped the branches that jutted haphazardly from its shoulders and head. It scanned the streets with discerning yellow eyes. Having inherited her forefather's brazenness, Turin took a step from behind the building. The slightest brush of her thigh against the tall grass, and the blight swung in her direction. Shadow grabbed Turin's arm and pulled her to his side.
No need to draw attention to ourselves just yet. There will be plenty of time for that once we have the others in tow.
Turin nodded. The blight's footfalls grew closer as the beast crossed the bridge toward the corner where the party hid.
Quickly, around the other side,
Shadow said. Lawden led the others around the corner and into a tight alleyway between the inn and what used to be an apothecary. Out into the open street, they dashed across the bridge and ducked into a vacant building, its door long since torn from its hinges. Turin peeked over her shoulder as she crossed beneath a lintel. All clear.
From here, the marked houses are 3 blocks to the east.
Senna rubbed at the grimy north-facing window and peered out into the street, kinking her neck to look as far in the direction they would head as she could.
One is on the north corner, the other is 2 buildings down on the south side.
Lawden nodded. We take the far one first and address the other on our return. Any sense for how many there are?
Not many. I can't imagine each of the buildings could hold much more than a half dozen. We didn't see any activity when we were scouting.
Hopefully some, then. It would be a shame to be doing this for nothing.
They'll be there, Turin said. Let's go. No sense in waiting.
Chapter 3.
Vela's love endures. She stands by your side through trial and tribulation. She holds your hand through hardship and despair. Praise be her name.
The Book of Korma. Unknown origin. Unearthed from the ruins of Travesty, month of Riet, 1287 AT. Umra burst from the gardens into an open field of delicate pink grass and stopped dead in his tracks at the sight before him. The path of scorched earth he followed from the crater wherein the Godslayer hatched continued, sweeping across the plains in wide arcs. The remnants of magnificent marble statues littered the landscape. At one time, there must have been hundreds of pristine sculptures gracing these fields. Now, they were little more than rubble. Fragments of charred stone crunched underfoot. Plinths supporting bodiless legs poked out from the grass. Where faces remained, blood streamed from vacant stone eyes. He approached the alabaster face of an angelic figure that lay at the side of the path, having been shorn from the rest of its head. He kneeled beside it and inspected its expressionless features, and dabbed the fresh blood on its cheek with a finger. It was warm, and the stone was surprisingly supple. The face's mouth opened wide. The statue screamed. Umra fell back on his rear and shuffled away from the bellowing face. His heart raced at the notion these things were alive. How terrible a fate to live as a shattered vestige of yourself, forgotten, like an egg carelessly knocked from the nest. For now, all he could think of doing was to not disturb them any further. He climbed to his feet and wove through the weeping statues. Leaving them behind, he came to a moat of azure water, Vela's grace looming beyond. He leaped across the moat and landed on the scorched earth before the crystalline tower. Here, the bodies of Vela's Empyrean guard lay strewn across the field, their teal skin singed and torn, their white tunics and angelic wings tattered and blood-stained. Feathers fluttered in the gentle breeze. Each corpse was no less than twice Umra's size, the gilded swords that lay beside them longer than a lance. Umra had seen plenty of death in his life, much of it at his own hands, but the scene before him brought a sense of sorrow and panic with which he was inexperienced. He ran to the first of the Empyreans and kneeled at its head. Platinum hair caked to a flawless face with a powerful jaw, a series of puncture wounds stretched from the angel's shoulder, across its bare torso, and along its right thigh. Bright crimson blood pooled beneath the angel, soaking into the cherry blossom pink grasses around them. The Empyrean coughed. Blood poured from its mouth. There was a remnant of life in the noble warrior yet. Umra prayed to Vela, and his icon lit up with blue ether. He placed his hands over the Empyrean's wounds and offered the celestial being a portion of his life force. The wounds remained, his efforts unsuccessful. The Empyrean coughed again.
There is no magic that can heal my wounds, Ascended One. My soul shall rest knowing your good deed. Tell me what befell you, Umra said, so I may better know what awaits me in avenging this horror.
The Empyrean's gaze fell on Umra, its opalescent, pupilless eyes tinged with blood. Their eyelids fluttered, and the angel reached for Umra's icon. It clutched the rhodium pyramid in its enormous hand. The chain bit into Umra's neck at the force of the Empyrean's grasp. Images of a great battle flashed through Umra's mind. The Empyrean guard streaming forth from Vela's diamond tower on majestic wings, gilded greatswords held high. Spara stood in the field, her celadon gown flowing as a massive worm barreled past her. The worm's pulpy body was the color of rust, but for an armored plate of bone around the three eyes on its head. 6 pincers protruded from a mouth ringed with dagger-like teeth. The creature's body pulsed, starting at its hindmost segment, and lit a chartreuse eye atop each segment as it progressed forward. When the pulse reached the worm's head, the 3 eyes on its face came to light, and a shock wave of force burst forth. The nearest of the Empyreans were incinerated, their bodies set aflame and cinders scattering on the wind. The force of the blast knocked those behind the vanguard from the sky. Spara smiled as the worm lurched forward and weaved its way through the field of fallen Empyreans. It gnashed them in eager jaws and cast them aside. The Godslayer barreled on toward Vela's tower. Another wave of Empyreans poured forth, and Umra's god came to the edge of a balcony high above. Her flawless blue skin glowed in the sun. She looked down upon her adversary with contempt. Her lip quivered as she held Spara's gaze. Then she flourished a rhodium sword in each hand. Umra snapped back to the present. His focus turned to the tower and the shattered balcony where Vela once stood. The Empyrean's hand released Umra's icon and dropped to the ground. Its body shuddered and fell limp. Umra jumped to his feet and took off in a full sprint, throwing the caution with which he had approached this strange and new situation to the wind. All he could think about was Vela. He hurdled the fallen Empyreans, leaped over the final two of the tower's concentric moats in a single bound, and came to the base of a grand staircase as wide as a fallen tree and nearly as tall as one still standing. The building at the top of the staircase and all its adornments were entirely constructed of diamond. A soft internal glow refracted through its countless facets and showered the grounds in prismatic light. Diamond shards littered the scorched landscape, a great fissure in the tower's facade throwing a beam of the purest light into the sky. The vast archway of the entrance lay shattered, something too large for its opening having forced itself within. No doubt, the Godslayer. Umra took the stairs in a few effortless bounds and charged into the collapsed portal. Toppled pillars and haphazard shards of diamond littered the hallway within, creating a crisscross pattern, like enormous daggers that had fallen from the walls and ceiling. Umra crept along the destruction, ducking under felled spikes, clambering over others. All the while, he hoped he wasn't too late. The hall opened into an expansive room that glowed with a nearly blinding light of no discernible source. It reminded Umra of Aldrasor's vault, where he and Spara found the Eye of Eminus, which could now be his god's ruin. At the center of the room, beneath the shattered ceiling, a crimson sigil was burned into the crystalline floor, smoke still rising from its pattern of crisscrossed lines. Beyond the sigil was a throne of flawless diamond, angelic wings stretching from its back, and two familiar rhodium swords resting against its left arm. At the chair's base sat Vela, her long, ebony hair draped over one shoulder, her fair blue cheeks smeared with blood and soot. She looked up, her gaze meeting Umra's, and she smiled through streaking tears. Umra ran to her side.
"I knew you would come,"
Vela said.
"I expected Spara to ascend with vengeance in her heart, but I did not know she was in possession of an Ekatar. Frankly, I was lucky to escape with my life. What is left of it?"
Her glimmering gown was rent across her stomach, a deep gash running beneath her ribs. The skin around the wound was black with necrosis. She was paler than Umra remembered. She looked fragile, defeated.
"I'm afraid that is my fault,"
Umra said, kneeling beside her and placing his hands over her wound.
"Along with helping her destroy the waystones she needed to ascend, I was also instrumental in her recovering the creature's egg from a wizard's lair on Tiverial. I had no idea what it was or how she would use it."
Vela feigned a smile.
"The power of the gods has been waning for ages. It was only a matter of time until she ascended, with or without your help. The burden of assuring her failure, however, now falls on you."
Umra didn't answer, focused on his icon. A radiant light grew from his pyramid as he clutched his hands over Vela's wound. The light faded. Umra kept his hands on Vela for a moment and then withdrew. His efforts had sealed her wound, but a deep purple scar remained. Umra frowned.
"It is the most you can do," Vela said. "Alas, this wound shall fester until I meet my end."
"How do I find her? I can stop this. I will stop this."
"I still sense her presence in Kalmandon."
Vela struggled to push herself upright, winced.
"Having failed in killing me, she would have likely gone to the mystics, the others of her kind, the others of your kind. She will garner their power and then try her hand at another god, likely one less formidable."
"So it's true. One must kill a god to become a god, and that is her goal?"
"She doesn't want to become a god, Umra. She wants to become God. With the Ekatar at her side, she will bring ruin to the Pantheon and claim Kalmandon as her own.
Umra pounded the diamond floor beneath him. Its flawless surface cracked.
I won't let that happen.
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.